Hi guys, I'm Natasha and welcome back to another episode of The Usual Place. Now, owning a car in Singapore has gotten a lot more costlier. Now, between the COE, the ARF and all the other expensive sounding acronyms, a car is one of the most expensive things you'll pay for here. But there was always the PARF rebate, money back in your pocket when you deregistered your car early. Now, Budget 2026 sort of killed that. Now, PM Wong announced that the rebate will be cut by 45 percentage points and the maximum rebate a car owner will receive will be halved from $60,000 to $30,000. Is this a nudge towards EVs, which are said to be less polluting? And does this make aspirations of owning a car more unattainable? Now, I'm curious to hear what my guests today make of all of this, and I'm going to introduce them. And I have veteran automotive consultant Say Kwee Neng, who now advises EV brands on the Singapore market. And next to you on the couch, I have my Straits Times colleague and senior transport correspondent, Lee Nian Tjoe. Guys, thoughts? Okay, we'll get into what you make of all these changes, but I think we kind of need a short lesson on what the PARF is. So, Nian Tjoe, for 10 marks, what is the PARF? What do we do with it as car owners?
Okay, first try, PARF. Number one is PARF.
Yes, 1 mark.
Ding!
Yes.
Which is short for preferential additional registration fee. But we really don't need to know what all that means. I think the most obvious and practicable definition is this is the scrap value that you get when you deregister a vehicle by its 10th year. So when you say about scrapping the car early or deregistering early, it's really about getting a little bit of that tax that you paid upfront. So it's not like money from thin air, it's what's been paid earlier. So that's a rebate.
So I guess how significant was it to car buyers before the recent change? Because I mean, I was a car owner and I never thought about the PARF when I was buying my car 10 years ago, right?
Yes.
So what's the thinking like? How significant will people read into this new measure?
So the first thing when the news broke was, what's PARF? And I think a lot of people are thinking that way, like, what's PARF? And we're talking about people who already own cars. Right? But oftentimes, because the concept of scrap value is that residual value of that vehicle, I would say it's maybe not at the point of buying, but it's the time of selling. When you're giving up the car, then you go, hey, so how much is my car worth? So the dealer might say, oh, your car is worth XXX because of PARF. Then you blank look, but that sounds like a nice number, I'll let go of the car. Yeah, so I think
exactly
it's
what I was thinking. I was
there you go,
like,
right? So it's not so much the buying part of the journey, it's in the selling. Yeah.
Back in the day,
as a veteran automotive consultant.
Back in the day, the high taxes applied to the ownership of cars upfront, the government assuaged owners that these taxes would be given back to you if you get rid of the car before they get to a certain age. And that was the whole idea, was actually to use this incentive to get old, oily, smelly, dirty cars off the road. So the whole idea of this was really to get younger fleets of cars onto our roads. That made a lot of sense. And I think where the PM was going with this was really with a new generation of electric vehicles coming on stream. Is this idea still applicable? So I think he probably answered that very well. Yeah.
So I guess that kind of answers the question about what he's trying to signal with reducing the rebate. But who will be most affected by this change?
I think the number one target would be the people who are still sitting on the fence when it comes to converting from an internal combustion engine car, ICE, to an electric vehicle. Bear in mind last year when the market had over 40+% of people buying EVs, there was still a substantial amount of people buying ICE cars. But what that means is that after 2 years of effort, there are only about 49,000 EVs on our roads. There are over 1,000 cars on our roads. And to get to a point where, the government is comfortable with the momentum, do they keep giving out incentives? They've already announced that any early adoption incentives will be taken away by 2027. Now, what's going to spur people on to jump into EVs? Leave the carrot aside for now. We're going to apply, I just hit the mic. We're going to use a stick approach. And the stick approach is basically saying that if you don't choose an electric vehicle or a more sustainable sort of engine car, you're going to be hit with a massive depreciation rate. And by taking away the scrap value, as Nian Tjoe says, now your car, which used to have a deposit refunded to you, that's going to be taken away. And so the full brunt of that tax is going to be
It's full
felt
on.
full
Yeah.
on for the next 10 years. Yeah.
I think I'd like to add, like maybe to clarify a little bit on why it seems to be leaning or biased for the EV buying crowd or the side of the house is so generally I think to simplify in my attempt to simplify, right, is that basically now in the world there are two types of cars. Cars that the government really like and those that really don't like it so much. Those that are preferred are the EVs. So to encourage people to get into EVs, there's a lot of incentive to reduce the upfront cost. So that before PARF situation, we're talking about the taxes. A lot of the taxes are actually taken away. It's not imposed in the form of a rebate. Problem with that, or rather the reality is that because the electric cars are taxed a little bit less, they're worth a lot less when they're deregistered.
Yeah.
Right? So this imposition of the change to the PARF rebate really hits the non-EVs more because they did not get the rebates upfront.
Yeah.
So come time you want to let go of the vehicle, when you're selling the car, non-EVs traditionally or conventionally used to have a lot more value locked in. You get more money back.
This was an unequivocal statement by the government to say that, hey, switch.
To EVs.
Right?
So
We're not
it's,
going to...
what you say is like a stick in a way. Like,
It's a
too bad.
stick.
If you want to drive, you got to
Yeah.
drive an EV.
Or rather, it's more like I'm telling you that really it's a bad idea.
It's a bad idea. Yeah.
A less preferred way to still stick with non-EVs.
Yeah.
So it's not so much a stick of like punishing you for taking an EV, but I'm taking away your safety net. Because on the ground, you have salespeople that say that if there's somebody who's not selling an EV, who doesn't have an EV in my showroom, no, don't buy an EV because their scrap value very low.
Yeah.
This
I think
is-
what's worrying is in 2025, of the 10 best-selling car brands in Singapore, 3 of them didn't have any EVs in their showroom. And if people continue to sit on the fence choosing the preferred old tradition ICE engine cars, then that would be a problem for the government going forward. How would they get more people into this preferred way of driving?
So what happens now to these car dealers if they don't have EVs in their range or they're just not offering EVs?
I think from the trade perspective, I think a lot of them were already screaming foul murder to their principals that they don't have EVs in the showroom because they can see where the trend is going. The government has been very single-minded about where they want to take this. So I think you will see that at the last motor show, some of these brands are now bringing in EVs into their model. Is it too little, too late? I think the Chinese EV brands have really stolen a march. They have really brought on so many variants, so many models. You're really spoiled for choice right now. So the legacy brands who are trying to play catch-up will have a battle on their hands. I predict that they will probably go through a fairly rough period of competition over the next 2 or 3 years before things start to stabilize. Bear in mind that the 3 brands that were in the top 10 selling brands were there because people have always trusted those brands. They've always preferred to buy a brand from them, that particular company. So they have brand equity on their side. If they add an EV to their portfolio, customers will still go to them.
So these 3 brands are Mazda, Honda,
I think Honda.
Nissan?
Honda.
No, not Nissan. Okay. Oh, is this a test now? Okay. I was
Yeah, yeah, for 2 points.
Yeah,
Or
for
3 points.
3 points. Well, I know it's Mazda for sure. And then there's Toyota. And oh my gosh, I'm losing the third one.
Honda, yes.
Honda? Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. 2.5. I got that.
You got it right, yeah.
But I want to ask, so because the PARF is now capped at $30,000, right? And the people taking the biggest hit are the luxury car owners. And we can sort of see when the cap dropped in the last bidding exercise. So if you bought a Porsche or a high-end BMW, right, you just effectively lost a lot of money in paper value. Do you think this is a stealthy wealth tax?
I wouldn't go look at it in that sense. I mean the brands you've mentioned, of course, they're really on the higher end, much higher end of the scale. I think the impact of the PARF rebate. Okay, number one, this 30,000 cap is the maximum rebate that you can get, whatever your percentage of your PARF is. And actually, very few cars are actually hitting the 30 now in come the end of their term in 10 years. But I think the also an relevant perspective to look at it. It's not so much about punishing them. It's about nudging the rest of us. And when I look at the calculation of the change, the effect of the change, it actually doesn't hit you. You're not thinking so much of your expensive $1 million cars. You're hitting that large MPV that some families use. You're hitting to name one, a Toyota Alphard. That's a popular and a useful car. Yes, it's used by some towkeys, But the rest of the world who needs it for, say, to move your elderly parents, that's a really good vehicle. But with this change, upfront, just the cutoff point of pre-PARF, post-PARF, the buyer is out of pocket or worse off by more than $50,000 in the ownership journey. So I think this is a significant point to make in that it isn't so much about beating up the very, very wealthy, but it's really hitting a sizable chunk of the population who would like to identify as more middle class, maybe upper, but middle class and not your top guys with most of the wealth.
I agree with Nian Tjoe because the real wealth tax came when they amended the additional registration fees step up.
Yeah, this is in 22 and 23.
That's right, because they had like first 20,000, 100% tax. Next 20,000, 140% tax. And it went from 40% more, 50% more, 60% more, up to 320% more. That, in my regard, is actually a tax on bigger luxury cars. So that was actually applied some time back. So I totally agree with Nian Tjoe that this is not really so, targeted at the rich and famous, but it will have overall impact on those who probably sit a bit in the middle ground, who aspire to own luxury brands and who want to go into entry models and so forth. This sort of PARF reduction would give them pause when they think about their next car.
Yeah. So do you think we'll see less of these like fancy cars on the road? Or if you're already buying a fancy car, then your like price tag doesn't really matter? Or like rebate doesn't really matter?
Oh, man.
I'll take this.
Okay.
When you pay,
Is it take
when you pay $120,000 for your COE, you're sending the government a signal that you don't really care. You don't really care about the car's
or no
price.
choice? 120,000. Some people need the car.
Yeah, well, $120,000 for we were just chatting yesterday, and a entry-level luxury brand that we know is now close to $300,000. Back in the day, a mid-size luxury car would only cost about $200,000, and this is an entry level. So what I'm saying is that sort of computation must cross your mind when you buy a car today. But when you say, no, I'm still going to go into the showroom after the motor show, I'll sign up for these cars, you're basically sending a clear signal that money is not a problem.
No. I think money is not a problem in terms of like it's not going to compromise your lifestyle or something.
For that segment, yeah.
But I mean, really, whichever the segment is, I want to suggest, right, the idea of the electrification of EVs, right? And oftentimes the general mindset is, EVs are cool. EVs are cool. I mean, they don't make any sound. They tend to come with like lots of features and everything.
Sorry, I'm not of that mindset.
Why not?
I just look at it and it's just like, EVs.
But let's just imagine for somebody who is now on that fence of moving, right? We can call them, where the shininess of the badge in the front of the car, typically in front, really means a lot, right? The sense I have when in the course of my work talking to people who are into electric cars, who have bought their electric car, very rarely, I think we're generally in this honeymoon stage, right? People still bowled over by the fancy tech that's in there. But at the same time, I get the sense that if you say you move from an expensive, tends to be German, high-end model, you move into a Chinese model and you go like, oh, did you just take a pay cut? I don't think that the idea really hits anybody, because the perception, if you want an electric car, who does electric car better than anyone else in all the world? It tends to be Chinese. So I mean, sort of push back on this, like on this brand part. Although yes, there's goodwill with certain brands because they've been around for a long time, and they're very aspirational, very desirable. At the same time, I think we are also at this stage where this excitement for EVs will move us towards EVs, and the best kind of EVs you want, if it's not a Tesla, which is American, incidentally, then tend to be some of the more likely the Chinese ones than the German or the Japanese. So kind of there's a sea change here that we're witnessing.
So I want to ask, because with the reduced PARF rebate, the aim, I guess, is to encourage drivers to renew their COEs and and keep their cars longer. La. So
Sorry, do you say the aim is to encourage people to keep their car?
Is that what it is? As I'm asking you, is like,
Right.
is this what is going to happen? Because when people are not going to consider like, do I sell my car at like 10 years old, or do I like keep it because I'm not going to get that much money back? And if that happens, are we going to see older EVs on the road, and what implications might this have?
There's some buzz in the market that people who are driving cars older than 6 years, coming close to their scrappage period, will probably do the sums and say it might be cheaper for me to keep the cars, just get another COE for another 5 or 10 years, probably 10 years, and then keep motoring. So I think there's probably some of that percolating in the market right now. There's also a group of people who say that, hey, now might be a good time to get rid of my car because demand for these cars will rise and I can get a better deal out of it. But I think generally speaking, the market now has been in a state of shock since COEs went to record levels. And, they're keeping on this practice of, well, I need a car, I'll buy a car. And whatever the COEs are, so be it.
I mean, this is really hurting. I would think that it was really hurting the middle income. The more COE goes or stays at this level and goes up. Because how are people, I'm really like, when I look at the prices, how are people affording this? Like, I just don't know how, like, will it go up further or not? Or will it come back down? Which is, sorry, I interrupted you, but I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, the price of it is just crazy.
I think that if the emphasis is on EVs and the main area of competition for EVs are in category A right now, although my thoughts are probably split into category B soon, then category A COEs should rise. And we saw that at the last bit. Will it continue to rise? I think it's inevitable because the PARF reduction just pushes people to choose EVs a lot more. And if you're telling the Chinese EV brands, the distributors, that this is where the action is, then they'll keep bidding up for these vehicles. So I think the rise in COEs in that segment is probably a given. However, by taking away this PARF benefit, some buyers will be removed from the marketplace. And that sort of hopefully will even itself out and then we'll come to a new state of equilibrium. Anytime a huge change like this comes into the car market, the market will go through a spasmodic shock, it will oscillate, and after maybe a year or so, it'll come to a level of like equilibrium. It's like throwing like you throw a frog into hot boiling water, not good.
You get soup.
Yeah, but if you slowly raise the temperature, I think we've been in an environment where the temperature for COEs have been raising so high that this is just another part of that exercise, and people will get used to it and they'll figure out a way for it. Yeah.
Nian Tjoe, do you? I wanted to go back to the question I started with, but what are the implications of having older EVs on the roads?
I think we might be getting a bit ahead of ourselves in terms of the older EVs. Because I think it's important to note that this revised PARF applies to cars that are registered after from the second bidding in February. So these cars will probably, these low or no PARF cars, right, only will get into the market a couple of years down the road. I mean, there'll be those who are, changing cars every 6 months, more than I change shoes or something. I mean, more power to them. But really, the bulk of these kind of cars that we're talking about, the EVs or anything, right, I'm buying an EV because of the lower PARF, rather I should say, would happen like right now. And these cars will only go into the used market a little bit later. So as with a lot of times with all these policy changes, right, there is a very long lag between implementation and impact.
Yeah.
So I think the impact in terms of older EVs on the road, we'll only be discussing this more likely in the 2030s, right, down the road.
Yeah.
But to answer closer to what I think you're edging towards is that can EVs really be so durable? Are they so desirable, right? I think I was trying to figure out when I last bought my iPhone. It's about 2 years ago. And it doesn't really bother me. Because if I liken it to how I think specifically an Apple iPhone, the early ones, every generation felt like a big change. Which was the one that had a front camera? That was a big deal. Suddenly you can take selfies without guessing, right? I think EVs are in that stage that are so up to today or thereabouts, are the pre-front facing camera types. What I'm saying is that down the road, we're going to get EVs that will have a big leap and then it will probably get into a steady state. No longer you'll be discussing, hey, your EV only do 200 kilometer range. That's terrible. Because now what is the norm? Out there, you throw a stone, hit a Chinese EV, then you probably have 400 over kilometer range. You can live with that already. So down the road, newer or the EVs to come will be more suitable to be used for much longer time. I remember the first EV I reviewed as a journalist had about, I think it was 150 kilometers on a cool day because you don't have to use the aircon. Those cars, you cannot imagine that thing staying on the road in more than 10 years. But if you look at a BYD today or any other Chinese cars, 450. I'm like, okay, so what is your risk of it falling apart? We don't know yet. But the good thing or the reality is that there's such a sizable population of these cars now. We will be able to see them mature.
But coming back to your thrust about used EVs, we actually have a slice of what used EVs are like now because most of the EVs sold prior to this PARF reduction have very little PARF value because of all the subsidies. In the marketplace, used car dealers are a bit reluctant to take it in. If they do take it in, it's for a far higher depreciation than, say, equivalent internal combustion engine cars, simply because there's no real demand in the marketplace. But if we were to look at where this is going to go in the next 3 to 5 years, I think demand for used EVs will rise at some point in time. And that will then equalize the market again. But at this point in time, I think if you look at where the EV market stands today in the used sector, it's not really enthusiastic. And a large reason for that has to do with that it doesn't have any scrap value. Will we go into a situation where the used car market is very different from what it used to be, where it was protected by scrap value? Now the cars are generally not much scrap value. Would it then follow a more traditional car market where used car prices are very low, not really propped up by any artificial edifice like a PARF rebate? We'll probably see a bit of that. But bear in mind, in Singapore, king is always COE prices. And as COE prices go, used car prices tend to follow. So we have a situation where, if you bought a car maybe 2-3 years ago, with the rise in COE prices, your used car actually went up in value.
Yeah.
I mean, where else in the world do you see that? Would it happen in the future? I think probably less so. But then used car demand will be driven by whether I see this EV that I'm buying in as a used car, whether it's easy to dispose of. And I think in the days ahead, the dominant brands will be the most popular in terms of used car as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a very basic question because I have not looked into EVs. But when you kind of like sell your car in the second-hand market, it has no value. Where does the car go? Like they just import it somewhere else, or like they scrap it somewhere else?
In the marketplace, what dealers normally do is if it sits in the yard longer than the desired 3 to 6 months, they would then say, okay, I'm calling time on this. This thing is never going to sell. It's a dud. Then they will just export it, re-export it. And they will then ship it off to somewhere where it can be broken down into parts or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the use, thanks for that quick, because I was really thinking where does the car go? But I want to ask about the ICE cars used market, right? Like, are we going to see, if more people are holding on to their EVs or holding on to their cars for longer than 10 years, right? What happens to the used car market? So you sort of explained it in terms of the EVs, but are we going to see a shortage of 3 to 5 year old cars, which is what's happening because people changes hands a lot quicker now, right? So how do you think in general the industry will play out?
Why do you pick 3 to 5 years?
Because I looking through the used cars and I see
I'm
in the market. I was like, hey, people sell after 3 to 5 years. Yeah. In general, what do you think will happen when, as you said, there'll be a lag time, right?
Yeah.
So what happens then?
My reading is that number one is that there's a transition, right? If anybody who has a pre-PARF revision ICE car, right? For perspective, I think I was looking at, say, something like a typical Honda compact size crossover. You should be getting about, say, $5,000 to $6,000 at the end of year 10. So what would you do? The natural thing is I will scrap this car because at least I am $5,000 better off, because this is your opportunity cost if you have to renew. So I think what is a likely scenario, I wouldn't say about the lack of supply of these 3 to 5 year old cars that you're looking for. Not you, but you.
He is me. He is me, yes.
Yeah, but it's really about the even older cars, they will not make it into their next 10 years, is what I see. So there will be this generation of cars or this vintage that will disappear. Yeah.
Okay. Say, do you agree?
I do. I think I need to highlight what's happening in the market right now. When this was announced, a lot of new car distributors and dealers were a bit caught out. Why? Because normally you carry about 2 to 3 months worth of stock in the market, to sell. When this hit, the usual sales rate for those inventory is now uncertain. You would order in cars and you'd be very certain they will sell at a certain rate. And you keep it in stock for about 2 months or so. Now with this implementation, then they would be really edgy about the stock they have on hand. So right now the market, what I'm seeing is that some of the brands that are affected by this PARF reduction will start to flush out this inventory as soon as possible. So maybe in the days ahead, there'll be some really good deals to be had. But these cars can only be good sales if you get the COEs. So they'll start competing on COEs again. The long and short of this is that new car dealers and distributors will have to sacrifice their margins in order to get rid of this problem inventory and then find a new level of inventory for them to operate on. They will take about 3 to 6 months to work its way up. Meanwhile, what will happen to used car prices? Customers coming into the showroom wanting to change into a new car will definitely be more savvy and say, hey, I want more for my used car because it's in demand right now. So then the dealer will be hit on both ends. Used cars, they have to price it up. New car, they have to reduce the price. COEs, they need to jack up their margins. So it would be a really difficult time for my brothers and sisters in the new car trade. But what will happen, I think, in the used car market is that it will go through this cycle and then it will find some stability probably by the end of the year. Yeah. Okay,
so if I want to buy a car, what is the most cost-efficient option now? Is it second-hand, Cat A ICE car, or EV?
A purple one. Oh wait, that's not the option.
Purple one?
No, not my color. Not my color.
Oh.
Like, skip. Yeah. What should we do if people are in the market to buy a car? Wow, the silence.
Yeah, pregnant pause as well.
It's like maybe not a good time to buy a car. I don't know. Thoughts?
I think it really depends on your position, right? If you start with you have a car in hand, meaning you want to trade in, maybe it's getting a bit funky, it's getting smelly or whatever it is. You need to change it. Then I think that it will be about going into the market and say that trying to secure the highest possible value for the car that you have to move to your next car. Whether that's a new one, a used one, I mean, that's another discussion. So number one is where you're coming from. Because if somebody who doesn't have a car, going into this market, it's a mess, right? Maybe you can score a really good deal from one of, say, his friends. Says, I really need to flush off this stock. Okay, good for you. Then get a new one, right? The difference between a new car, a used car and all that, I think there is a certain, we like to believe that there's a certain simplicity or it's a more elegant solution to buy a new car because they tend to come with everything. Used cars is not talking about buying a model, you're buying that specific car. It's like going to buy a resale flat, right? Is this one because this one is facing this certain way, it's got whatever history behind it. So I think it's always a very, very tricky or just a less convenient way to get into. The other thing is always to consider, another important factor is that typically with the new cars, you can actually have more financing options, right? So if you can somehow afford the down payment, which is based on your old car value, so that part about getting rid of your old car is important here. Then your entry point, if you can make it into that down payment and you move into your installment phase, it might probably be a little bit more palatable. But I'm only talking about on a month-to-month basis. Ultimately, a new car will cost more. I mean, that's the most obvious thing.
I think generally, if people still think buying a car is a good idea in Singapore, all these changes is clear to me that the government is sending you a message, try not to buy a car. Because buying a car is a really expensive exercise in Singapore. But if you really do need a car, whether it's for familial responsibilities or lifestyle requirements or work requirements, then the question you need to ask yourself is, what do I need the car for? And once you've identified that, then you got to lock in on what budget can I spend, right? because I think that's a nice progression to have. Then once you've got your budget locked in, then the choice of whether it's new, used, or whatever would come into play very naturally. Some people will refuse to buy a used car because of all the reasons that Nian Tjoe says. Okay, all power to them. But buying a new car is an extremely expensive exercise after the PARF reduction. So what are you going to do? We haven't even gone to the rising finance cost that might be coming. That's a separate podcast. But I think, essentially, I've always believed that buying a used car is a very reasonable solution if you can afford some of the creases in that arrangement. That's what I would suggest. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to quickly pick up on something you said. I mean, so does this mean like for people learning how to drive, like young people in their early 20s or like even people who just want to have a car, like they aspire to have a car, does this all effectively kill their dreams of doing so? Because it's too expensive. The COE is so high now with the new PARF rebate, and it's like what you said, the government's just moving you towards, public transport or, private hire cars or whatever, taking Grab basically. So do you think this effectively kills their dreams?
This is one of my major gripe about all the things that's happening in the car industry now. I had an occasion to host my daughter's friends for a dinner party. And, when we started talking about cars, I would expect a cacophony of protests, price so high, yada, yada. When I asked them that, they said, no, we'll never even think about buying a car. I said, why? Is it because you prefer to like Grab and all this? He says, no, uncle, that's not it. It's way out of our, budget right now. And for me, what saddens me is that you are basically saying that these policies are robbing some portion of our society of their aspirations to own a vehicle, whether it's for lifestyle, whether it's for achievement's sake. That aspiration now is really removed from the marketplace. And that saddens me because when I was growing up, getting a license, driving your dad's car, going out for your first date, it was a rite of passage. But I think right now that probably is going to be amended. And it saddens me from a personal perspective, yeah.
Nian Tjoe,
As a younger person.
Much younger.
Yeah.
Yes, by decades.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like color TV, pre-TV.
Decades.
Anywho, I rather approach this car ownership question to the why, right? I mean, say briefly touch on it as well. There are a lot of times you have people who says, I need a car now. And we use the word need like specifically need.
Yeah.
Need can be a job, right? Reporters need to run around, get to the scene of whatever quickly. You need a car. Or it is about family, right? Babies on the way. Or the folks at home are a little bit less mobile now. There's a real need. And we're talking about regular, frequent needs. I mean, ask any parent out there, tend to be younger, with really young kids who are still going to school or primary school or even younger, endless enrichment classes or something. This is your choice. But to be able to enable you to take the necessary means to do your enrichment classes and so on, you do need a car. I think this is where there is definitely conflict because classes is one, but getting that car now is a problem. And the way I also think about another perspective is there's this other issue where we kind of associate COE as the end all. What we're looking at is a car value. You're buying a car. Nobody ever bought a COE. The people on the internet says the piece of paper, well, correction, there's no paper. It's all done online, right? But ultimately, it's the value of the car that you're paying for and what you're getting out of it. I think the PARF revision and everything brings it sharply into focus that there's nothing left now. You need to approach it like how people who are used to buying motorcycles, companies who are buying commercial vehicles, they never had PARF, at least not in recent history. So I think this is that reset. It's what we need to come to terms with. And then if after post-reset you go like, I still want a car, then I think definitely the consideration that Say raised makes a lot of sense. Figure out how much you need or how much you have. Then figure out what you're going to end up with.
All right. On that note, as the youngest person on the couch. Sorry. Thank
You're
you.
not on the
both.
couch.
Yeah,
You're not-
on the
thankfully
not on the
you're not
couch.
on the
Okay,
couch, yeah.
on the podcast. But thank you both for that. I mean, I hope the people watching will get some perspective on what to do next. I mean, I know what to do next now. Tahan, pray and hope the prices come down. Or not. But thank you both for being here. And that's it from The Usual Place. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss new episodes of the podcast. Now, if you have thoughts on what we just discussed today, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you next Thursday at noon.